so now that we've watched Heather's video, we want to spend a little bit of time giving her some feedback on the data that we've collected, both when we just watched the video without sound, and then when we were able to see and hear the lesson. And you have your video analysis worksheet you can refer to. We'll just popcorn out, we'll ask questions. Heather, you feel free to ask us questions as well. And we'll just talk about what went on in that video and the instruction that you provided for your students.
I'm going to start with high praise for deep questions. You just had, I couldn't write fast enough to keep up with the deep questions that you had. Whose point of view is this? Let's just say hypothetically this. What would their viewpoint be? Now that you've come to that conclusion, do you think it's persuasive? But what's the purpose? I mean, it was just on and on and on and on and on.
They're honor, so I am trying to get to that rigor, whereas I may not take it to that level in other classes, but for them, that's the expectation that I have.
And I think it's clearly established. They respond to that so well. One thing that I had written down, I recorded a lot of those same questions and stems, but the way that you use vocabulary that you want them to use when they talk about it. And I don't think we always do that because sometimes we try to break it down, but you use the vocabulary that you want to hear them use. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, I had down that you asked lots of open-ended questions, and I sort of filled my box with that, and that you never let your students stop with one response. You kept pulling, and I think the fact that you realize that this is an honors class and that you have to take them to a different level of rigor is important with this, and you're definitely hitting at that.
I thought that she has a very comfortable classroom where they felt like they could answer, not knowing if they got it right, that they took the risk of saying it, not knowing if they even made those different connections or if that was a theme or whatever, but they still wanted to do it. They still felt comfortable enough to state those.
It's funny though, because after the video, they're like, you were not yourself. You were so, like, not, I guess I didn't smile as, and going back and look, I hope that I smile more. I hope that, I feel like I was maybe a little nervous and stoic in my body language, and they picked up on that.
I thought it looked like you just didn't feel well.
I didn't. I was in my
like
second week of a sinus infection. So, 2 rounds of antibiotics and steroids later came in. But yeah, I didn't, yeah. But should I video again? Because I felt like I was, at that point, I'd been sick for a week and a half, I was running out of time and had to get it done, so I did it. But I do cough throughout the whole thing, and I know that's
Well, no, it's just it's your bite. You just look like you're not
Yeah.
comfortable. That's all.
Okay.
And I would assume that National Board's probably going to interpret that as nerves.
Yeah,
And that's not something that they'll take points away. You know, remember, this is not a deficit model. It's that building that solid wall of evidence. So I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. I wouldn't worry about that.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the girl in the first group who wears the glasses? I'm not sure I ever saw her talk at all.
Maddie? No, first group. Brittany.
One between.
No, it was one of the twins, Brittany or Courtney. And that's one thing that I noticed as a weakness, I mean, this is like the 4th or 5th time I watched it. I haven't watched it too many times, but I did write down in my notes that it seems like there are 2 or 3 people in each group that kind of carry the load. But I chose the groups, and when I did that, I knew that I had my twins, my Brittany and Courtney, are very shy. So I purposefully separated them. I didn't have them in the same group, and then I put them with some of my more vocal students that I kind of knew had those leadership abilities that would take the lead and be better facilitators than some of the others. So, but now in hindsight, I'm wondering if that was the best way to set the groups up, because those people who I knew would take charge did take charge, and the others just kind of sat back.
And that's a reflection piece. You know, I mean, that's something that you could look at as maybe you would change that. But I think a lot of times, especially when we're doing stuff like this, we expect to see every person in the group talking, but you don't always have to talk to learn.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they probably learned a lot, and even in their written analysis, you know, you had different opportunities for them to really show you what they had learned. It wasn't all coming out in that conversation.
She was definitely attentive through the whole thing.
One of the things that I've seen other candidates try and be successful with is to really pinpoint those ones that maybe were not as vocal in the video, but provide some type of demonstration in the written analysis that here's how I know that even though Amy didn't talk in the video, that she really learned what I expected the group to learn. So you can talk about it that way, because you do have that opportunity to pull from other sources.
What did you guys think?
I thought the question was great. It's like you were the facilitator, but you were also a part of the discussion. You helped to drive a lot of the discussion. So
And that's another thing I worry about. Did I, in some of the groups looking back, did I participate too much? Like, I feel like sometimes I said for them what I wanted them to say.
What I noticed was after you would give your input, if they asked you a question, you would kind of go and explain it, but then you always turn the question back on them. So it never stopped with you finishing what you were going to say. You told them what you were thinking, but then you asked more open-ended questions to get that thought process rolling.
Yeah, you got them answering exactly what you were saying, you got them answering, and then you piggybacked on that.
And I think what another important piece is there are definitely procedures in place in your classroom that are evident that allow you to have these long conversations with groups. It was same thing with your video. You were able to stay there with a group for a long, extended period of time, and everybody else in the class just continued what they were supposed to be doing. And that shows a lot of those procedures that you've already put into place, and the expectations that you have for students, and the climate you've created in the room.
Because that concerned me whenever we watched it with no sound. I was like, boy, she's been with this group for a long time. I wonder what the rest of these kids are doing.
Right.
And then whenever we watched it with sound, I mean, they were doing exactly what you expected them to do the entire time. When your camera person kind of panned around, you could tell that they were all on task, all engaged.
But that's this group too. I teach an honors block at the end of the day, and they're completely different. Like, when I did this lesson with them at the end of the day, it just was not as strong.
And I don't want you to, but I think you're.
I know, but I just,
Right.
I know, but,
You play a part in that.
but it's definitely those kids too. I mean,
You have to give yourself credit for the good things that you do in your classroom, because National Board cannot assume that this is happening. They can't assume that you set these procedures up. You have to be explicit and tell them that because this is what I believe about students or learning or whatever it happens to be, this is how we do things in my room. And sometimes when we see candidates who are not as successful, it's because they haven't built that solid wall of evidence, and they just assume, well, everybody does that. No, they don't. That's what accomplished teachers do.
They don't.
So give yourself credit for those good things you do in your room.
That's one of the most difficult things about National Board, is being able to look at yourself and pat yourself on the back.
toot your own horn.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't do that very well.
Most teachers don't. I mean, it's not something that we do.
Most great teachers don't.
That's ridiculous.
Most great teachers don't.
And you are a great teacher. Like when I was watching that, I want to be an English teacher like you when I grow up. Like that's what I want.
Whatever.
Because your questioning, that doesn't, I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen in a lot of classrooms, regardless of the level of kids that you're teaching. I mean, that just doesn't come forth like it did in the video. That was incredible.
It was very natural, so it was not forced.
Right. And it was so obvious that you had knowledge of students, that you knew how far you could push them. And you knew what they had learned in the social studies classroom, and were able to pull from that as well. I was wondering, did you give certain groups specific political cartoons on purpose?
I did. I know who my high flyers are, because even in honors class, and I talk about in my instructional context, I have a pass for the one little boy, one of the small little boys who was talking at the very end, Liam. He is a genius kid, but he rushes through everything. And so his pass score is a 628, which is met. And he's in there with Tony, the bun and glasses, who has an 828 and is almost a perfect score. So even in that honors class, you have to differentiate. So knowing that, I purposefully, and I tried to give every group one that was a little more challenging and one that was a little easier.
And
So they did, but I wanted them to experience success. Maybe if they didn't do so well with one, they would with the other. But then some groups had some that I knew another group never would get. So I did, should I talk about all of that?
Did you hear what you just said?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. What you told us is that you want to ensure that your students are successful, that you realize they're at so many different levels, that you have to challenge them, but you have to give them an opportunity to be successful first. And that, I mean, I even thought, because I was picking up, like, the boys seemed to have, or that one group, they had a political cartoon that was dealing with sports and concussions.
They're all athletes.
And that's what made me kind of ask the question.
The connection that you said there, like what kind of research is going on?
I know, I thought that you knew that. You knew that you could take them there.
That was a beautiful moment.
And you got the aha moment too. I love that that was on tape with that one girl, and she went, "Oh!" And
That's
jumped
why
up
that's
like
what
a
it's
telephone call. Yes.
And their little faces were so cute when phone, like they were so embarrassed for you that that happened. And that says a lot too, I think, you know, just about how much they care about you. All kids don't care about their teachers, because their
No.
teachers don't all care about them.
That's true. What else? What'd you catch?
She did a really great job of relating it to what they know. And it goes back to, picking those political cartoons that she knew that they would be able to understand, and kind of took that previous knowledge that they already know and they have experienced, or they know some of it about it.
And I actually pulled them from her book that she uses in her class. A lot of those cartoons were a book that she has that I knew they would be covering, had or would be covering that content in social studies. We were trying to make those connections or get them ready for what they will see. And I told
They're
them,
getting away.
you might see some of these same cartoons again, and then in Ms. Barnett's class, you'll be able to connect.
Well, core proposition number 5 says that we're a part of a learning community, and we work with other professionals. And I think it's great to talk about those things and be able to describe the fact that I did talk to so-and-so down the hall, or this other teacher down the hall, and I know what she's going to be doing, and I'm helping, and we're working together because here's what I know about how children learn. And to be able to bring that in.
There was a moment in there, one of the questions is, what evidence do you see of students taking intellectual risks, and does a climate of classroom provide a safe environment for getting something wrong? There was a moment in there, I think it was fairly early on, where you were giving guidance to the students on getting them to analyze the political cartoons. You told them, do the analysis, you don't have to get to the answer immediately, just take the steps and go through the analysis first. I thought that was strong.
One of the highlights for me was, and this is probably coming from an English background, but whenever you encourage them to look at it through different lenses and different viewpoints, that's a very sophisticated practice for 7th graders, and that you have them doing that, I think is impressive.
Heather, what questions do you have for us?
I was worried that looking back, that I talked too much and facilitated too much. And I can address that in my reflections. I think most of my questions come from my write-up. That's where I'm struggling. I sent you my instructional context and I revised, and now I'm 2 lines over, but I still don't feel like that last, the 4th bullet that I still don't feel like I adequately addressed that. Like, I don't feel like I say enough. And I'm an English teacher. I'm trying to make it pretty, and I got to get past that. So I feel like that's my write-up is where I'm concerned at this point.
And Heather did send me some of her work, and I read through it and was able to offer some suggestions to her. And one of the biggest ones was just making sure that you answer every question. Remember, part of it's in italics, part of it's not, but you have to address both pieces of that question or that prompt. National Board is expecting that of you. I would write it, and then when I would go back and reread it, I would highlight the question when I felt like I had answered that one, and I would make notes to myself that here's where I answered that, here's how I said it, here's my proof, whatever it happened to be, because I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything at all. And when I read for people, I have the questions right there, and I'm literally checking off, here's where I found the answer to that question. I've got the evaluation of evidence guide, which I've told you over and over again, that's the least used National Board tool, and probably the most important one that you can have beside you when you're looking over your writing, because that's what the assessors have. So I'm making my notes on there almost like I was an assessor, and just seeing where's the gap, what am I not seeing? And then I always go back and I take my highlighters, and I have 5 different colors. And I'm highlighting, here's everywhere I see core proposition number 1 yellow. Here's everywhere that addresses core proposition number 2 green. And if I don't see a rainbow by the time I get to the end of your entry, that tells me that you're missing something. You're missing one of those core propositions. And that's the backbone of what is National Board certification. So if you're missing it, then we need to go back and we need to look at it. So that's sort of the process I would encourage you to go through as well when you're reading your own work. And this is a process where, you know, we like to do this, and you guys have done a great job today with putting yourselves out there and being willing to hear criticisms, critiques, and also to allow us to brag on the good things you're doing. You can't hold your national board work this close. This is about collaboration. This is about learning from one another. None of us are perfect. None of us have arrived. So we've got to share it with the world and learn from the process. Any closing thoughts, anybody? That part. So bad. It wasn't so bad. All right.